In 1878, Swedish archaeologist Hjalmar Stolpe uncovered a grave at Birka that would spark debate for more than a century. Inside was a body laid to rest with unmistakable symbols of warfare and status. A sword across the lap, an axe, armor-piercing arrows, 2 horses, and a set of gaming pieces likely used for planning military strategy. To everyone at the time, it could only mean one thing: the grave of a powerful Viking warrior. Naturally, everyone believed the warrior to be a man. It would take more than a millennium for science to uncover the truth. In 2017, DNA analysis confirmed what nobody expected. The warrior was biologically a female, and that revelation ignited one of the fiercest debates in Viking Age archaeology. Were shieldmaidens, those legendary Norse warrior women from the sagas, real historical figures? Did these rare exceptions who defied gender norms exist? Or are modern scholars projecting contemporary values onto ambiguous evidence? The truth is messier than any saga ever told. Let's start with what we actually know. Grave BJ 581 at Birka isn't unique in containing weapons alongside female remains. Norwegian archaeologists have documented multiple Viking Age burials where women were interred with swords, axes, or arrows. But here's where interpretation gets interesting. Weapons in graves don't automatically equal warriors in life. In Viking Age Scandinavia, grave goods serve symbolic and social functions. A farmer might be buried with tools he never personally used. A merchant could be interred with scales representing trade rather than actual commercial activity. Weapons in a woman's grave might signify her family's martial status, her role in household defense, or even mythological associations with Valkyries, those supernatural choosers of the slain. The Birka warrior grave stands apart because of its completeness. This wasn't a single token weapon, it was a full kit. The gaming pieces are particularly telling. These weren't entertainment, they were tactical planning tools. Byzantine sources describe Viking commanders using similar pieces to plot strategy. Their presence suggests military leadership, not just symbolic warrior identity. But even this evidence has skeptics. Some scholars argue the grave could represent an exceptional individual, perhaps a queen or chieftain's daughter, who assumed leadership during wartime, without proving that female warriors were common or accepted. Others question whether the DNA analysis was contaminated or whether the grave goods were disturbed and rearranged over centuries. Then there are the literary sources, which are simultaneously our richest evidence and our least reliable. Norse sagas overflow with shieldmaidens. Lagertha, who fought alongside Ragnar Lodbrok. Brynhildr, the Valkyrie princess turned warrior. Hervor, who retrieved her father's cursed sword from his burial mound and led Viking raids. These stories are undeniably compelling. They're also undeniably problematic as historical evidence. Most sagas were written 2 to 3 centuries after the events they describe, composed by Christian monks with their own theological and literary agendas. They blend history, mythology, and moral instruction into narratives that prioritize drama over accuracy. Asking whether saga shieldmaidens were real is like asking whether Homer's Iliad proves specific combat details from the Trojan War. The kernel of truth is so heavily embroidered with legend that separating fact from fiction becomes impossible. But here's the interesting part. Medieval Norse audiences didn't seem to find female warriors particularly shocking or unbelievable. If shieldmaidens were pure fantasy, completely alien to Viking Age culture, you'd expect the sagas to treat them as supernatural marvels. Instead, they're presented as exceptional but plausible, rare, noteworthy, but within the realm of possibility. That cultural acceptance might be our most valuable clue. It suggests that while female warriors weren't common, they weren't conceptually impossible either. The sagas might exaggerate and dramatize, but they're drawing on a cultural framework where women occasionally did take up arms. Skeletal evidence offers another angle, though it's frustratingly limited. Studies of Viking Age skeletal trauma show relatively low rates of violent injury overall, both for men and women. Most Vikings weren't professional warriors engaged in constant combat. They were farmers, traders, and craftspeople who occasionally fought when necessary. Among female skeletal remains, weapon-related trauma is exceptionally rare. You don't find healed sword cuts, embedded arrowheads, or defensive fractures from parrying blows. This absence is significant but not definitive. It could mean women rarely fought in combat. It could also mean that women who fought were skilled enough to avoid serious injury, or that wounded female warriors didn't survive to leave skeletal evidence. The lack of trauma also doesn't account for women in support roles during military campaigns. Managing supply lines, defending settlements while men raided abroad, or commanding strategy from positions that didn't involve direct hand-to-hand combat. Medieval warfare wasn't just about swinging swords. It required logistics, intelligence, and coordination. Women could participate in the military sphere without necessarily wielding weapons themselves. Modern academic debate over shieldmaidens has become almost as fierce as any Viking Age conflict. On one side are scholars like archaeologist Leszek Gardowa, whose preliminary studies on warrior women burials have garnered nearly 100 citations and argue for taking female weapon graves seriously as evidence of genuine martial roles. They contend that dismissing weapons in female graves as merely symbolic perpetuates androcentric bias, assuming male graves reflect reality while female graves reflect symbolism. On the other side are researchers who warn against wishful thinking archaeology, the temptation to project contemporary gender egalitarianism onto past societies that definitely weren't feminist utopias. They point out that exceptional individuals don't represent systemic norms. Medieval Europe had Joan of Arc, but nobody claims medieval France had gender-integrated armies. The controversy intensified after the Birka grave DNA results went public. The reassessment article by Price and colleagues has been cited over 200 times, with responses ranging from enthusiastic support to methodological criticism. Some scholars question whether the grave was disturbed in antiquity, whether the DNA samples were properly controlled for contamination, or whether biological sex necessarily corresponded to social gender roles. What's really at stake here isn't just Viking history, it's how we interpret archaeological evidence when it challenges conventional assumptions. Do we require extraordinary proof for claims about women in male-dominated spheres? Or do we risk rewriting history based on incomplete evidence? Here's what the evidence actually supports. Shieldmaidens were almost certainly rare exceptions rather than common fighters. Viking Age Scandinavia wasn't some proto-feminist society with gender-integrated shield walls. The overwhelming majority of warriors were men, and social structures were thoroughly patriarchal. But rare exceptions still matter historically. The evidence suggests that under specific circumstances, perhaps during leadership crises, in households without male heirs, or among women of exceptionally high status, some Norse women did assume martial roles. They weren't fantasy tropes invented by medieval writers, but they also weren't representative of typical Viking Age gender dynamics. The Birka grave probably does represent a female warrior or military leader, though whether she personally fought in battle or commanded from a strategic position remains unknown. The saga accounts likely contain fragments of authentic tradition wrapped in layers of literary elaboration, and the archaeological evidence, while sparse, is too consistent across multiple sites to dismiss entirely. What we're seeing isn't proof of shield maiden armies. It's evidence of a society where gender roles, while generally rigid, had enough flexibility to accommodate occasional exceptions. Women who demonstrated exceptional skill, came from powerful families, or found themselves in extraordinary circumstances could sometimes transgress typical boundaries. That's less romantically satisfying than the saga stories, but it's probably closer to the truth. Vikings were people, not characters in a fantasy novel. And people are always more complicated than the categories we try to fit them into. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.